Okay, raise your hand if you believe it is not equitable for women, or you can raise your hand in the chat. Okay, well, I think we know where we are. So we'll launch right in to these four amazing women. You're going to hear from Christine. You're going to hear from Asma. You're going to hear from Gisela, as well as Gabby. I'm going to let them introduce themselves individually. The format today will be each of them will have 5 minutes to share with you what they do, why they do it, and an instance in their life where they felt there was a gender inequity that happened. Then we'll move into a conversation for about 10 minutes with me, and then open it up to all your questions. But feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along, and we can grab those out and throw them out at the end. So this is a much more interactive session. So Gisela, would you like to kick off our session?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I think it's a very important issue. To introduce myself, I can say I'm a psychologist that while I was working to make my living out of my clinic, happened to have a part-time job as a field researcher in São Paulo slums. While we were investigating the socioeconomic and nutritional status of families living in 20 favelas here in São Paulo, we as a multi-professional team developed a methodology to diagnose and treat malnutrition in favelas, child malnutrition in favelas. This methodology was soon replicated in other communities, and 4 years later, I co-founded CRANE, the Center for Nutritional Recovery and Education, funded by an international NGO that treated child malnutrition in the community, clinics, and day hospital. Our disruptive interdisciplinary approach engaged the family and extended the treatment far beyond nutritional issues, giving them clinical, psychological, and social assistance. This methodology and its results broke some scientific paradigms and were broadly studied, originating more than 150 scientific papers. The methodology was disseminated all over Brazil and in more than 17 countries. And in 28 years, CRANE helped almost 8 million people and plays an important role in the design and evaluation of public policies. Today, I'm at CRANE's board and other NGOs, also at self-organized movements like Catalyst, of which I'm a co-founder as well. And I am dedicated to study, teach, and design social interventions that promote sustainable change in people's lives. Thinking about the question, I think I guess that my examples were as when I was as a woman entrepreneur experienced gender inequality refer to very subtle situations that are repeated over time, especially when fundraising negotiations are with businessmen or men in political positions. For instance, once I have spent a couple of months designing a project to treat child malnutrition in the public schools in the city of São Paulo. The negotiations were very good and were with the Secretary of Education, a man that deeply knew myself and respected a lot my work. After I delivered a full project with budget and everything, there was a silence, and it took like more than a month until I was able to get a meeting with his female assistant that had to tell me that they had made a partnership with a male physician, not a female psychologist. On the other hand, negotiations with women are hard, maybe even harder, but are usually much more successful. I was asked by a national bank here in Brazil to design and deliver a methodology to fight malnutrition in the whole country. And were actually able to get the contract, and we did the project. I think that's what I had to say just to start. Thank you.
Bella, thank you for sharing that. Asma, would you like to go next? And Asma is going to be have an interpreter, which is Gufran, for her talk.
أسماء هلأ صار دورك، تفضلي. اسمي أسماء الراشد، عمري 30 سنة، متزوجة، عندي 4 أطفال، لاجئة سورية حاليا في فرنسا.
I'm
شكراً.
Asma Rashid. I'm 30 years old with 4 children, mother with four children. I'm a refugee from Syria, living now in France.
كنت قد خرجت من بلدي بسبب الحرب في عام 2012 ولجأت إلى المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، وسكنت في مخيم للاجئين لمدة 10 سنوات.
I was a refugee in Jordan. In 2012, I was displaced from Syria to live in Zaatari camp. And I have been living there for 10 years before I left Jordan to live in France, which was 2022.
خلال فترة قطوني في مخيم الزعتري أو في مخيم اللاجئين في الأردن، عملت مع عدة منظمات دولية ومحلية. كنت سفيرة نحن نحب القراءة في المخيم، بالإضافة لأني قائدة فريق لمنصة نحن بدعم من اليونيسف، معلمة رياض أطفال مع Save the Children International، إضافة لأنه كاتبة قصص أطفال في مجلة الطريق. طبعا
Throughout the 10 years that I lived back in Zaatari camp, I used to be working with a lot of NGOs that are working with the refugee community there. I have took a lot of positions which have started with the fact that I took a training with We Love Reading, and I started being a social entrepreneur in my community by reading aloud to children. And then this got me the spotlight to be highlighted by other NGOs who wanted me to work with them because I was very active in supporting. And I was one of the leaders to one of the teams of volunteers there.
بالإضافة لأني قمت بابتكار مشروع هيا لنقرأ، مشروع متخصص بدعم الفتيات المراهقات، دعم التعليم، دعم الثقافة العامة أو الوعي العام بشكل عام، والدعم النفسي بشكل خاص يعني للفتيات. إضافة لأني مشارك في حملة توعية للوصول ل1,000,000 امرأة حول العالم عن طريق توثيق قصتي من خلال فيلم حكاية الحي لمنظمة هوم ستايلر.
I also started my own project, which was targeting adolescent girls to support them mentally and to support them in psychosocial aspects, because as adolescent girls in Zaatari camp, you would get married early. So I started the project, which is called Let's Read Together. And this helped them talk about their problems, talk about their dreams, and share their aspects about living in Zaatari camp. And this was documented in a documentary that I'm using now to reach out 1 million other refugee girls. They can watch and learn how social entrepreneurship mindset can start.
بالتأكيد واجهتني عدة تحديات وكثيرة هي التحديات، لكن سأخص بالذكر اليوم تحدي واجهني بالنسبة لي كامرأة أعيش في مجتمع محافظ جدا. تحدي بشكل شخصي أني كفتاة مسلمة ومحجبة كنت أعمل في داخل جروب غير مسلم. ذلك واجهت بعض المشاكل واضطررت للوقوف أمام دعوى قضائية بسبب ذلك. والتحدي الآخر واللي هو المهم أنه فرصة اللاجئين أو اللاجئات قليلة جدا، وأن وجدت الإجراءات جدا صعبة بصفتنا لاجئين.
Besides the fact that I'm a refugee, I'm a Muslim and living now in France, I have been facing a lot of challenges because I'm coming from a conservative background, and because I was working with international NGOs, and because I'm a married woman, and this has its own complications in my country or in my culture. I have been faced with some legal implications because I'm working with groups that are not Muslims, that are not from the country itself, and that are outsiders and have been seen as an outsiders. That's in general. That's what are the challenges that we face. But specifically because I'm coming from the conservative background, this has been very much challenging.
طبعا أخذت على عاتقي مسؤوليتي تجاه نساء مجتمعي أو فتيات مجتمعي نظرا مني لأن قدرات الفتيات والنساء متشابهة حول العالم، لا فرق بين لاجئة أو غير لاجئة، هي متشابهة في بعض التحديات، وأردت إطلاق العنان لقدرات هؤلاء الفتيات والانطلاق في العالم ودعم طموحاتهم ومواهبهم وإلى ما إلى ذلك.
I hold dear to my heart the fact that I'm supporting all of the women around the world, and specifically refugee girls and refugee women. And I see myself as a representative, and I'm trying also to share their perspectives and their challenges as well in any platform that is supported, provided for me.
Thank you, Asma.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. It's wonderful to hear from an education social innovative. I'm going to move now to Christy, please.
Hi, everyone. My name's Christy Peacock. I work in East Africa for the last 40 years or so, working with smallholder farmers and pastoralists, often the most marginalized groups in faraway, quite remote parts of rural Africa. Always trying to improve their lives through improving the way that they farm so that they have more food for their children and money to spend on education and whatever. And that's always been my passion right from the start. My first degree was in agriculture. And when I arrived, I found that out of a class of about 100, there were 8 women. Things have changed now, but that was the case all those years ago. But I've always taken the attitude that if you're in a minority, wherever you are, in a room, in a meeting, in a career, in a profession, that it gives you as a woman actually an opportunity to stand out and make a difference through standing out and giving a particular viewpoint. And I've spent a lot of my time working on targeting support to women, marginalized women, widows, women-headed households, and promoting their cause wherever I possibly can. I've spent time in public sector research as CEO of an NGO, but most recently I set up a social business in Kenya called Sidai, which means good in the Maasai language. And I've seen a whole new wave of so-called impact investment coming in to Africa and presenting all sorts of challenges because that money largely comes from the north, directed to the south. And the data shows that the vast majority of that money goes to white men, usually young. And so there are 3 issues that I've been confronted with, both on a personal basis and through friends of mine in Africa, around race, gender, and age as well, I would say. And I can see, and I remember so vividly, a Kenyan entrepreneur friend of mine in tears sitting outside my house, begging me to go to her next pitch to help her even get in the door, let alone get the money. So I always try when I go into a room to try to remind myself, even now at my great age, that I am the expert in the room. And I know the context, I know the situation, I often know the subject matter more than those others in the room who are usually men with money. And I keep reminding myself of that, and I tell young women, first, bluff your way, pretend that you're confident, pretend you know stuff, and then it will become a habit of mind and a habit of behavior, which can lead to great things, because great women really, really stand out above everyone else. And you can see that around the world, that great women leaders really stand out. So very happy to talk more about my experience and my thoughts on how we can change what is ultimately the power dynamics that we work in.
Christy, thank you, especially for that mindset shift that I think we can all work on, right? Is moving from being a beggar to a resource. And that again, that mindset. So thank you. I wanted to let everyone know too, Bio, who was on the initial panel, is not able to make it. She's out ill. But we do have Gabby, who I'll introduce in just a second. But in the meantime, would all of you as an audience, feel free to contribute your questions into the chat, because after Gabby talks, soon after we'll be moving into some questions we want to hear from you. So Gabby Arenas, welcome to join us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you, girls, for the invitation. Well, I am the co-founder of the TAP Foundation. This is an organization created 15 years ago to work using art to promote peace building in the more dangerous communities in Latin America. We work with the gangs, we work in the disarm process, we work in the most dangerous slums across the region, including Central America, the Maras, the Venezuelan gangs, the guerrilla in Colombia, armed groups from indigenous population in Chile, also in the north of Argentina. And our work tried to change the mindset of people who is living in violence, to teach them through art, to have new sorts of incomes using creative industry, to have new ways of relate with their communities, and new ways to change the dynamics of powers in their communities. In 2014, we were displaced from Venezuela because the political situation. We became refugees in Colombia. The term refugee doesn't exist in Colombia. We are migrants that has to do the best they can to integrate in the society because there is not any protection. Of course, at that time, with the foundations, we start to work with the rest of the Venezuelan migrants that are living the same situation in Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. And we try to get our programs to the most dangerous communities in the borders. We are in Chocó, which is the jungle, the Pacific jungle that connects Colombia with Panama. We are in the border between Venezuela and Colombia. We work to help them to overcome migratory grief, which is probably one of the most critical issues to integrate yourself in a new community. And at the same time, we keep working with our young men in the gangs and in the communities to invite them to have a different life. We have right now, 4.5 million beneficiaries in the continent. And the funny thing is that every time that we go to talk about our numbers and our impact to do fundraise, it's not me who is invited. It's my husband and co-founder, Carlos. And that is one of the many, many issues related with inequality that we have in our region. As you know, Latin America is one of the regions that receive less funds for social development, and almost 80% of those funds goes to international organizations led by white men, organizations led by women. We are learning right now how to do it different, how to don't depend of that came internationally. We have been working a lot with crowdfunding events and crowdfunding initiatives, and that allows us to break that idea that women can't. I'm also part of the board of the Cheese Global Forum, which is a forum organized by an incredible women social entrepreneur, Nadia Sanchez, here in Colombia, to invite women across the region to came to Colombia to learn together and to develop new alternatives to get fundraise, to get more political participation. I participate myself in 2 processes to develop new laws, one for peace building in Venezuela during the disarm process, and the other one for refugees in Colombia. And the recognition of those processes have not been done for the women that participate, not only me, more than 30 women that participate in the process of creating the law was made for the Colombian ex-president, Iván Duque, who's not participating in the process at all. And that is something that we saw every day, but it's something that we are changing right now with new alliance with other sectors, with new narratives for ourselves. This is our work. We are in the communities all the time. Actually, I am in the car, as you can notice, because I'm coming back from one community and grabbing an airplane to Madrid next week. And in our work, as Christine said, we are the experts, but we are also the people that care for the others. I really resonate with asthma because it's our responsibility, it's our work, but it's also what we do as a mom, as a woman, and care and be professional and be brave is part of our everyday, not just mine. I'm representing thousands of incredible Latin American social entrepreneurs that are doing an amazing job in our region. And yeah, there is a lot of inequality, but there is also a lot of change at the same time.
Gabby, thank you. Wonderful. Great. And you brought up the whole bit about, the humanity. It is the men and women in the world that are making the difference. You indeed are working with young men as well, right? Who will also be part of the future. So I want to move now into several minutes of questions with the panelists before we again get into any questions that come in from the audience. The first question is again back to and I want to call out Winthrop and acknowledge him for being on this call. It is wonderful to have a man amongst us, and I think we can all agree here that we need allies, right? And you're the other 50%, right? So thank you for representing that.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm going to turn this back to the panelists, but I thank you for being here because one of the big questions I think we all have is moving this more into action, right? We're going to now shift more from, and thank you for telling your stories, which grounds us in your personal realities. And I'm sure each one of us on the call has our own, right? Our own story. But how can we bring the men along on this journey? What is the most effective way that you believe we could bring the men along on this journey so that we do have a more equitable world? And if each of you can just give 1 minute of an idea on that note, that would be great. And whoever wants to jump in from the panel.
Well, I can start as I started before. Sorry. I think it's a problem with. I think this is more a symptom of a multifactorial issue. There are tons of causes, and I think it's very much related to mindset. And maybe we can make a whole analysis saying, oh, there is the Industrial Revolution, there is this whole idea of scaling up and making lots of money, and men have embraced it, embodied this thing. Maybe this is one of many things, but I think it's a matter of mindset. And one way of starting changing this kind of mindset might be changing the boards of the companies, because it's a business mindset. And so if we have more, in my experience, whenever I deal with women, it's I mean, all the challenges are there, but it's more like it's a different way of exchanging and seeing the problem. So if we could have women, like half at least, or 30% of women in the boards of big companies, and also women as being awarded as social entrepreneurs and being in other different situations. For instance, here in Brazil, the award, I was elected social entrepreneur by Schwab. I was the first woman here in Brazil to win the prize as a unique woman. Before there was another one, but she and her husband won the prize. So, and this was also, I think, our awareness that also the Schwab Foundation and everybody was conducting the prize, saying, "Oh my God, look at that! They hadn't realized that before." So it's a matter of mindset, and I think we can start also in companies as well as in politics, right? Positions of power, let's say.
Great, Giselle. Anyone else on the panel would like to contribute? Not all, like fall on you.
I definitely agree with Gisela. I think women in boards is fundamental. but I also think that's important to change also the mindset of women. I'm part of a few boards, several, I think, right now. And I have female women that are with me, but are not promoting, participations of more women because they are trying to feed the shoes of a man. And I think if we are there, we need to do things right. For me, equality is 50-50. We have in our organization, 50% men in the board, 50% women in the team, the same, in the beneficiaries, the same. And we try to do everything, even our collaborations. We are in several development ecosystems for systemic change with more than 300 allies. And now it's 50-50. 50 of the organizations are led by women, 50 of the organizations are led by men. And it has to be a way of act also for us. For understand and highlight the work of women, understand and highlight also the work of men that are doing a great job, the work of the minorities, but not in a way that is condescending, in a way that is recognizing their work as you do it with anyone else. And yeah, I think that is complementary with what Gisela was saying.
Excellent, Gabi. Thank you. Asma, I'd love to hear from you.
باعتقادي انه طبعا اللي حكوه بالاول السيدتين اكيد صح، المرأة لازم تدعم المرأة واكيد الرجل لازم يدعم المرأة، بس نحن كنساء بتوقع انه لازم كمان اكثر توصل صورة المرأة للمجتمع، نظهر قدراتها اكثر، نتحدث اكثر عن انجازات المرأة، دعم المرأة، دعم الرجل شوي للمرأة، لانه دائما الرجل بيروح على الشيء المادي، بس المرأة دائما يعني بطبيعتها هي صبورة وبتصبر لحتى تعمل المشروع وتستنى ممكن سنة، سنتين، 3، 4 لحتى بعدين يصير في عندها مردود مادي. فأتوقع هاي اللي يمكن الفرق بينهم.
Hopefully I'll be able to translate all of that. Asma is agreeing with Gabriella and Giselle and think that women should support women and women should be leading the process of changing the mindset as well about themselves. But also we tend to come also from the fact that us as me as someone who's from a community that women barely get any support, I think I play a role in showing up as an example for other women to follow as well. As for the men who can support us, usually we also should show that women have the ability, for example, to have the patience, to have think or have a different approach than men, which can be also holistic approach. So the more we show that, the more we will also have the space that we deserve.
Thank you, Asma. Christy.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, well, I mean, my experience is, get men out of boardrooms and meeting rooms into the real world, because they often sit in boardrooms and meeting rooms and they don't really engage a lot with the real world. I mean, I'm thinking about people with money, here. But I think we have to kind of play the game as well. I mean, we have to not just appeal to the heartstrings, invest in this poor woman, but also make rational arguments and economic arguments for investing in women and children and communities and so on and so forth, because that's the engine of the future of humanity, and people need support. And there's a perfectly rational economic argument to invest in all sorts of support for women, and to make that case in a perfectly rational, professional manner, without just kind of playing that condescending, rather patronizing card, frankly, about poor women, kind of needing a handout, which I loathe. And so making the case that even the poorest women in any society have a huge and important role, not only in the economy, but also bringing up future generations of children. And I'm speaking as a 65-year-old who's just acquired an 11-year-old Kenyan boy. So I'm starting to understand what it is to be a mother and appreciate being mothers all over the world a hell of a lot more than I've ever done in my life before. I can tell you.
Christy, thank you for that, and thank you for bringing up the funding. I'm going to punt back over to the audience here. Raise your hand if you sensed as a woman that you've had any difficulty raising money for your organization. Okay. So making this action oriented again, so that when you guys click leave meeting, you have some tools here. What specifically can we do as women to help unlock that money? And again, that's multifaceted too, but what are some specific things, like what we can do now to start moving that shifting of mindset, unlocking funding? Chrissy, I'll start with you since you led with funding, and then the others can chime in.
I mean, you know, as much as we'd like the world to change overnight, you have to understand, you know, the world as it is at the moment. And as I say, I think, you know, kind of play the game and connect to whichever investor you're targeting, and taught their language, and but add to it. I would say don't kind of shift it, but add to it, and add that richness and dynamism of emotion, I think, of kind of humanity as well as numbers. You know, the reason, I mean, it's a staggering statistic at the moment in East Africa. Village Capital did a report a few years ago that showed that 90% of impact investment capital is going to young white men in Africa. I mean, it's a staggering amount of capital just going to the young white men, typically who may have been to your business school, who've been to some business school. So they've got the PowerPoint skills, they've got the Excel spreadsheet skills, they can do fancy projections. They've also got the networks, they've got all the advantages, but they have no clue about the local situation in the way that local entrepreneurs would have, men or women. And so, you know, that's the game that they are playing, and they're winning. And it's annoying, I can tell you, when a lot of quite basic, really important basic services and, you know, whatever it is not reaching the poorest people, and the business models that serves the lower income people in a more culturally relevant and sort of, I would say, economically, locally literate way is just not getting the money. And so those ones win, and then new investors pile in, and then it's a self, you know, perpetuating circle, virtuous circle of more and more money. But what we're seeing now, which is very interesting, is a lot of those businesses are going bust, and impact investors are getting their fingers burnt. So I hope that we can turn some of that experience among some impact investors to, you know, to the advantage of more locally rooted business models and ways of working that are much more sustainable, relevant to local people, and are worthy of support.
Thank you, Christy, and also for bringing up the fact that it's not just about funding, it's also about different levels of education, perhaps, it's a different language.
Yeah.
Also access to networks. Right? So those are all areas that we can certainly work on. And again, how to do it, how to flip those areas. Does anyone else on the panel have something they'd like to contribute onto the how we can get to more equity? Gabriella?
Yeah, Melanie, in our experience, we stopped looking the funders, like literally, and we start working with other group. We start working with private companies, which normally analyze the facts, you know, the numbers, the investment that you are doing in the community, the change that they can see. We also start working a lot with artists. And as soon as the funders see that we are receiving support from artists and private companies, they feel like fear of missing out and they start coming again. I think that it has to be because the dynamics of power in that area is probably the most complicated for the social entrepreneurs, you know, the relationship with the funders. And I think funders have their ideas, their own way to think stuff, but are not outside in the communities. We are in the communities. And as soon as we start notice that we have the knowledge, because we are who are in the street with the people, you know, getting the data, getting everything you want to know. I know it because I'm there. You start to create a more collaborative relation with funders. And it's not, I need you, is let's do this together, you know? And for us, the best way to do it was to start working with private companies. And I have to say, the first private companies that start support not only our organization, several organizations through an alliance that we have with them, are companies led by women. And that was something very important because it's not only the fact that you are analyzing, you know, the work and what we are doing, is also that you are being part of the movement that is trying to change things in our region.
Gabby, thank you so much. We're getting some questions coming in from the chat, so I'm going to shift now to some of the questions that are coming in. And we'll start with Winthorpe. Winthorpe, do you want to ask yourself the question that you contributed to the chat?
Sure. Yes. Hello. Thank you so much. I'm really moved by your testimonials, and they resonate from what I see. So my question is really about leadership style and money and the logic of entrepreneurship, including social entrepreneurship, as it's been kind of handed down, if you want to say, which is much more around this, you know, business scaling, the individual hero, and so forth. And those with the resources as funders, not seeing that necessarily in what you are doing. And my question is about the leadership style. And, you know, in my kind of amateur observation, I feel that in general, you see much more collaboration and inclusion in women's leadership style in general versus the traditional male approach. And so to what extent do you have to kind of, you know, that phrase lean in, or as Christy said, sort of play the game in order to get the validation? And how much does that, maybe if that's true, does that compromise and kind of corner you? And, you know, I guess what Gabriela was saying was that she's just circumventing those folks and trying to get other resources from other places. But I'd be interested in that leadership style question and whether you think that is valid or not. Thank you.
Gisela, would you like to answer?
Yes. Yes, if I may. I was thinking about your question, Winthorpe, and also I'd like a lot the suggestion Olivier made in the chat, saying we should make public the work women are doing, that the global community recognize the work women are doing. And I do think this is important because of what you just said, Winthorpe, because it's a different mindset, it's a different approach. It's about, and I'm not able, I tried, but I was never able to change my mindset, because when I look to a problem, I want to solve it fully, completely, and not just superficially. And that's the way I am. And it's not a problem. I mean, we also need to do superficially is not a good word, but I mean, in terms of a scaling up, you understand? I want to deliver the whole thing finished. And it's a different mindset, and they are complementary, and it's okay, but they need to be equally valued and recognized. And so I think I can't change. So I would rather think about strategies like Olivier's suggestion here, to let's broadcast. these styles, saying, look, if you do this way, you get these results. But if you do that way, you get the other results. And the other results take you in that direction. Thank you.
Anyone else on the panel like to contribute to that on leadership styles?
I think that there is not necessarily very different. You know, we all do a strategic thinking. We all do annual planning. We all organize our budgets in a way that are more effective and productive. But at the same time, that I think the only difference that I can see is the fact that we are bringing also a lot of caring and humanity to our work, you know, and that is something that is fundamental for us when we are thinking about a program or thinking about an alliance. And we are not just thinking on the objective result, as we call it in our MBAs, is we are more thinking in how this could help people and how it could really change and impact people. I think that's, for me, could be the only difference. And also, I think it's important to highlight that many, many, many companies right now are trying to bring those leadership styles. And then the reason why, if you go and try to see the business schools around the world, you will find more and more women that are teaching about other kind of leadership style. And in our sector, sadly, the transition to recognize those kind of styles has been a little bit more slowly than in the business sector, but it's also that is happening right now.
Thank you, Gabby. I'm going to ask the audience if they could put in the chat. What do you believe are the one things that you could do right now that could help shift this toward more equity? And the reason I do that is because it's something we'd like to capture. If there's other ideas, then you've already heard from the panel. But please go ahead and list those in the chat. Again, if you personally in the audience can think of one thing that you could do now to help shift things, whether it be the mindset, the access to funding, the language, the access to networks, or anything else that we haven't thought of, that would be great. I'm going to pump back over to the panel here and ask, imagine an equitable world. Everyone on the same playing field. What would that look like? What would that feel like? What would shift in how you're doing your company right now? What would change? And I'll start with Christy.
Just thinking about it, actually, Melanie. I was sort of going off on a little daydream about what on earth it would look like. I mean, you know, the big thing that would change is obviously at the leadership level. I mean, Gabriella is amazing if she's got 50-50 all the way through her organization, which I certainly have never achieved. And yeah, it'd be a challenge, I think, in an African setting. Maybe I'm making up barriers in my own head that aren't there, but I think it would be. So I think, you know, at a leadership level, right from top to bottom, there would be, I think, you know, that wonderful nirvana of equal opportunities for all. But I'm also a great believer in merit and people getting to positions through merit. I mean, if I ever thought that I got a job because I was a woman, I would not be happy at all. I know that, as I mentioned when we were preparing for this session, that when I stepped down as the NGO CEO, that the board, which was very male dominated, definitely wanted a man to replace me, because they were fed up with this kind of stroppy woman. who frankly knew a hell of a lot more about what she was talking about and the subject matter of the organization than, you know, they all did. And they found that challenging, I think. And I think they wanted a nice, neat man in a suit who was sort of thought the same way as them. So I think, you know, if a real world of, you know, equal opportunities for all would obviously have over a period of time have men and women leading, you know, demonstrating their own characteristics, whether it be by gender or personality or whatever it may be. And I think we'd have a kinder and a better world as a result of it.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And Asma, what would the world look like if there was gender equity in your work?
تمام. شو رح نعمل لحتى نغير العقول ونقوم بالتوجيه المادي للنساء؟ أول شيء ممكن
أسمع السؤال هلا هو تخيلي عالم متساوي فيه الرجال والنساء، كيف رح يكون بالنسبة لك؟
تمام أوكي. أكيد رح يكون عالم مختلف. لما بتتجمع القوة أكيد رح يكون في نتائج كمان أقوى، ورح يكون في نجاح أكثر، لأنه التعاونية أصلا مطلوبة. يعني التعاون بين الزوج والزوجة أو بين الأب اللي بيدعم النساء اللي هن بيكونوا بناته أو زوجته، فهذا الإشي جدا مهم أصلا. يعني بين نحن بنحكيها بين ما إيد لحالها تسقف بيكونوا مجموعة معها، فش ليش لا؟
It will more look like a cooperative world where everyone is completing the other instead of competing, which means father has his role and the spouse also has his role, and they both complement each other instead of competing.
بذلك كمان رح يسهل الوصول للمانحين والتحدث إليهم، لأنه فيما سبق كان في حديث أنه في غيابي على ما أظن أنه زوجها ساعدها للحصول للدعم، فهون كان في تعاونية، فهذا الإشي جدا مهم. فهون وصلها يعني توصل للمانحين وللدعم اللي هو الدعم المادي.
Going back to the question about the role of men as well, it's very important to have their also supportive role. Because whenever they are completing or supporting us, we can get more access to funding. And answering the funding question, it is through my husband as well, who's been supporting me in the house and outside of the house. We cannot dismiss the fact that he is also a contributor to my success.
وبطبيعة المرأة تفكر دائما بمشاريع خارج الصندوق، يعني شوي بتكون مميزة، فإذا صار في تعاون هي بتتشجع أكثر لحتى إنه تخاطر أو تجازف بهاي المشاريع.
And usually we women tend to think outside of the box. So whenever we have the support of someone like a husband or a man, this will help her get encouraged to do more and to get more ideas out of that box as well.
Awesome, thank you. That's very, very powerful. Gisela.
I was thinking about so many things. The question about how the world would look like. I do agree with Asma said about collaboration. I don't think, and someone in the chat said something similar. I mean, maybe one thing I dream of a world when we don't need even to compete for money, but we can collaboratively get the money and use it collaboratively. But this is applied also for men and women. I think that this is a very important. We are all together in the same place, which is this planet, and facing the same problems. The problems are exactly the same all over the world. We just change our languages, but we face the same problems. And therefore we need to find strategies to mechanisms that allow us to do this collaboratively and not disputing for a place in university, disputing for a grant, disputing for whatever, or attention. I think that's what we're doing here right now. We are trying to do in Catalyst and so on and so forth. So I dream with this world where we have this big desire to promote a common good together.
Lila, thanks. And I'm going to move actually back to the audience in the few minutes we have remaining. I want to thank Lilina, Inky, Angela, Olivia, who've all put in suggestions into the chat that are very powerful. If any of you who I did put into the chat would like to say anything to the panelists or ask or comment, please jump in right now. This is a great time. Olivia, you had some great suggestions on civil society and government as well. Any of you would like to contribute, please. Winthrop, you're also putting in more suggestions. This is great, and I hope we're capturing those with Catalyst, because these are, again, the idea is when you press leave meeting that we have some tools, whether us as individuals and or Catalyst as a whole can start thinking about and putting into action. Great, you guys are all contributing great things. So things on communications. Again, the boards thing is huge. Again, a question, how do you get there though, right? How do you get to being on boards? Because it's a catch-22, isn't it? Again, if there's suggestions, again, people feel free to jump in, audience, if you'd like, in the few minutes we have. If not,
Melanie?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mary Arismendi. First of all, I want to say thank you for having this panel, amazing women, super inspiration. I'm also glad we have male participants. I think that's part of the solution, that we are allies. So I think we should get them more involved, and congratulations also to all those members and participants that are joining today. And I had a suggestion, since this International Women's Day theme is Embrace Equity. You know, they always have an image. This time is kind of creating a hug. So I was thinking maybe to end the session, we could replicate that sign, and then we could all make a commitment to post it on our LinkedIns or our social media. Also I think as an example of letting people know that we're here together and we're like taking the time to understand each other and look for best practices and everything.
Lilina, I love it. It's a great visual as well. That's great. And so we can take the challenge to each post ourselves, hugging ourselves, right? And embracing equity. Thank you for that very much, and for your comments in the chat. Anyone else like to jump in over the next minute or so? Well, in that case, I'm going to kind of move to final words from the panel and kind of advice for young women entrepreneurs in particular. What would you say to them entering this space? And again, around this gender coaching, if you will. Anyone of you want to jump in first? Gabby?
Go.
I think I will say, be brave. Don't be afraid to be in the spot that are traditional for men. Be empathic and highlight the work of your other friends, men or women, and also be aware of what you are doing, because I think this kind of change start for each one of us, each one of our organization, each one of our projects, and then we'll see the difference.
Thanks, Gabby. In 15 seconds, Gisela.
No, I was just saying more or less the same, saying spend time and energy knowing deeply the value of what you do, because then you are able to communicate it. We do need to spend time and energy doing that.
Wonderful. Asma, advice to the younger generation, of which you're part.
أكيد بدي أحكي لهم إنه يآمنوا بنفسهم، يآمنوا بقدراتهم. هم أكيد رح يكونوا صناع تغيير ويوصلوا لكل العالم. بس وحتى ممكن التغيير اللي رح يعملوه يمكن يضاهي تأثير الحكومات أو رؤساء الدول وهيك. لأنه جيل نحن الجيل اللي عايشين هلا الأزمات والحروب وكل هاي الأشياء اللي عم بتصير بالوقت الحالي، فإحنا بنات هاي الأزمة، وإحنا النساء اللي لازم نحاول قدر الإمكان نبتكر مشاريع تساعدنا وتساعد أطفالنا وتساعد الجيل القادم. شكرا لكم.
Believe in yourself, believe that you have something to give to the world, and the more that you give and contribute, the more you will be powerful. It's going to be hard, a lot of hardships that we are going through now. It's not going to be easy, but what you can do, the impact that you can have can reach the level of a government, can reach a level of really high influential person. Just believe in yourself and do what you have to do to save the generation and to save other women like you as well.
Thank you, Asma. Christy.
I think it's pretty much been said, Melanie. I think, you know, really have that confidence, understand the value, understand that whoever you're talking to or presenting your work to needs you as much as you need them, maybe. Have that confidence. It's a habit. I think a lot of confidence, it builds up over time as you maybe you're bluffing your way as the start, but then it becomes a habit, and you can become the authority and the expert in the room that people listen to, and then you can drive change if you can communicate effectively what you're doing in the real world. So yeah, be brave and don't take any shit and don't get knocked back. Just go again.
Thanks to everyone, the panelists, for your from the heart testimonials, and all the audience as well. Onwards and upwards, everybody, and thank you for joining.
We're missing the picture.
On three. 1, 2, 3.
Wait, we have to hug ourselves.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.